in June of 2021, Joy had to go to the Brain Aneurysm Center at Johns Hopkins University. And we decided that we would take the train to Baltimore. Now, we're not big train experts, but it's what we decided to do. And of course, we caught the train, rode it all the way. And when you got to Washington, D.C., instead of there just being people here and there, it became packed because it went on to New York City from there. But our stops were in Baltimore, and there were 3 stops in Baltimore. And now the train is full, and every time it stops now, 20 people get off, and it seems like 30 or 40 people get on. So there's this constant movement there, and it's they're maybe there for 60 seconds, maybe a minute or two each time they stop. So you have to make it real fast because you got your luggage, and people are getting on, people are getting off, and we missed our stop in Baltimore, and we had to go all the way to Wilmington, Delaware was the next stop. So we get off in Wilmington, Delaware, and we're going to have to take another train back to Baltimore. It takes us about 2 hours, or as I say, 2 Snickers bars, in order for us to be able to catch the next train. And when we get back to Baltimore, man, I'm telling you, we are like bulldozers getting off that train that time. We get inside, and I go to my phone and I say we're going to get an Uber. So we get an Uber, and of course I can see him on my screen, and we start walking to the main entrance. And when we get to the main entrance, there's a big sign that says, "Warning, remain inside until your ride is here for your own safety." Well, I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, it means just what it says. It's not safe outside the door. Uber guy finally comes, and he takes us to our hotel, which is downtown. And the next morning, we take a cab over to the hotel, over to the hospital, and Joy is there going through tests and seeing doctors for most of the morning. And probably about 1:30 or 2 o'clock, we go back to our hotel, and I say, let's walk down to the Inner Harbor and eat lunch. Now, the Inner Harbor was this, it's where the Chesapeake Bay comes all the way into Baltimore. And if you remember that barge that hit that bridge, it's about 2 miles up from there. So we were going to eat lunch down there because 30 years before, when we had lived in Falls Church, which is just on the other side of DC, we came up there all the time, and there were these seafood restaurants, there were these craft vendors, there were all these different people that it was kind of a fair atmosphere all around there. There were clipper ships and sailboats, just everything that I loved. It was right there. And I was envisioning it was going to be that way again. Well, when we get to the Inner Harbor, it is not that way. In fact, all of the businesses except for one are now boarded up with plywood and covered in graffiti, vulgar graffiti, no less. Every so often there is honestly a piece of art that someone has, like a Banksy, like a piece of art that has been sprayed in between everything. But the businesses were no longer there. There were no restaurants. There were no clipper ships or sailboats. And I was sad because I had remembered this as a great place. And I told this story about something that happened to me and to Joy when we were there, I guess 30 years before. That's really where my story begins. 30 years ago, Joy and I used to live in Falls Church, other side of DC. We would come there to the Inner Harbor. Sometimes we'd spend the day, like spend a Saturday, maybe spend a Sunday afternoon. But there were all of these restaurants, and there were these craft vendors, there were these sailboats, there was the National Aquarium was there, all kinds of things. It was like a fair, cotton candy. Well, down at the other end was a merry-go-round. And one day I said to Joy, I said, let's go down there and ride the merry-go-round. Let's just ride the merry-go-round. So we walked all the way to the other end. It was probably a quarter of a mile down to the other end. And we stood in line. I bought a ticket. They were only $1. And then we made our way over to the merry-go-round. And I remember getting ready to step onto the merry-go-round. I looked down at the concrete, and the concrete was cracked in such a way that it looked like it made a person's face. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen that or experienced that, like clouds will make something like an animal or something. Well, the concrete had cracked in such a way. It was like someone's face, and it was significant enough that I remembered it. But I stepped on there and I got right on the big black horse right there, and he looked like somebody that would take me for a good ride. And so I harnessed up, and all of a sudden music started playing, and it started moving slowly at first, and it was going up and down, and it would go faster and faster and faster. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, I could sense that the motion was slowing down. And then all of a sudden the music got quiet, and we just kind of came to a stop. And I got off the horse, stepped onto the concrete, and there was that face in the concrete once again. In other words, I had gone through all of this motion, up and down. The music blasted. There was all of this activity. There was all of this stuff that was going on. But I'd gone nowhere. I got off the same place that I got on. This is the story that I used to tell. And I would say, we think about life in the same way, that somehow, because there's motion and activity, that we should get different results from things. Have you ever made this statement? When things settle down, or when this is all over, kind of thing, then I'm going to do this differently, only to discover that we find ourselves in these same patterns, these same ruts, doing the same thing again and again and again, but hoping for a different outcome at some point. We hope for a different outcome. Maybe this time it will be different. This is what I concluded. In order to have gotten off somewhere else, while I was on there, I would have had to have changed horses. Changed horses. Then when it stopped, I would be at a different place. But that's scary. Changing horses while it's moving, while there's all this activity, that's scary. In fact, it's hard for me to make those kinds of changes. There's uncertainty. There's this part of it I don't know about. I don't know how this ends. I don't know. You see, all of these kind of things, there's barriers and these little voices that say, don't do that. And so I find myself in these ruts, in these patterns. And you see, I want my life to continue to evolve no matter the phase that I find myself in. I want to keep that up. Sometimes I get angry, for instance, at myself. Maybe because I don't say no to something. Or maybe I don't say yes to something else. Maybe I don't take the risk of doing something that is way out of my comfort zone. And so I find myself getting off the same place that I get on. Well, I don't want that. I'm saying to you that activity, that motion, that music, that up and down doesn't mean anything's going to change. Change is intentional. It's a choice. It's something that I choose to do. If you're in an abusive relationship, do you think that person is ever going to change? No. The change is up to you. It's up to you. If you're in a job where every 3 or 4 months they promise you that when things settle down and when this is over, I'm going to let you do one of your projects, you need to create a strategy for getting out of there. Maybe you'd like to go back to school. Well, it's not automatic. Maybe you would like to find somebody to date or to marry. Listen, they don't knock on your door. No, change is intentional. It's something that I must choose to do. I must choose it at every stage of my life, and at this stage, it's even harder. You don't like your doctor? Change. Get a different one. Chances are they're going to move or retire before you do. It's important to stay comfortable. Yes, it is also important to make yourself uncomfortable with change. It's uncertain. I don't like uncertainty. It's makes me nervous, you know? I don't like that stuff. I had a friend. One day he told me that he was $40,000 in debt on credit cards. I cannot imagine that. And this is what he said to me. He said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to work to pay these off, and then I'm going to cut them up. See, it has to be reversed. I have to make the change first, and then the behavior follows. See, it's something that's hard. It's not easy, but it's important that it stay a part of my life, or I'm living in these ruts. I'm living in these patterns that they don't care. It doesn't care whether or not my life gets better, or that I'm frustrated with a situation, or that you feel like you're being taken advantage of. It's not going to automatically change. You have to get on to a different horse. You have to intentionally do that, or nothing is ever going to happen. I want to continue to evolve as a person in every phase, in every stage of my life. I want that for you too. Subscribe to this and share it with somebody.